and welcome to today's webinar. It's our Farm Country Update focusing on the ag retailer of the future. I'm Margie Eckelkamp. I'm the editor of The Scoop, which is Farm Journal's multimedia brand serving the trusted advisor. We are the official publication of the Ag Retailers Association, and recently at the ARA conference, I had the pleasure of co-presenting with Brett Scotto, and also featured on the keynote stage was Ken Zuckerberg. So the three of us then got together after that leading industry event and said, we need to do a webinar to talk about the top takeaways we had all presented in San Diego. So joining me today for this discussion will be Brett Scotto. He is the founder and CEO of Aimpoint Research, a global strategic intelligence firm specializing in agri-food. Brett is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and former Army intelligence officer. So he brings a practical, results-oriented approach to the civilian business world. We also have Ken Zuckerberg. Kenneth Scott Zuckerberg is an accomplished financial strategist that serves as the lead analyst for grains, farm supply, and biofuels within CoBank's Knowledge Exchange. Ken brings more than 30 years of diverse experience spanning industry research, equity and capital structure analysis, and investment management. Before joining CoBank in 2019, he served in similar capacities at two other major agricultural lenders. So welcome to Brett and Ken, and I really look forward to this discussion. Brett, I know just to get us kicked off, if you would share a little bit and set the stage for where we are as an agricultural industry and a little bit on how you see change coming.
Well, sure. Thank you, Margie. And it's certainly a privilege to be here and always appreciate joining my friend Ken as well for important discussions. And I think that the idea of retailer of the future, how does retail and distribution need to evolve in order to be prepared to serve the future state of agriculture and the farmer of the future, is a topic that is certainly one we should be debating and discussing and challenging ourselves on. Before I jump into some thoughts, I want to acknowledge the folks that have dialed in here and tuned in for this important discussion and start by saying thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you do every day, keeping American agriculture strong and helping our great farmers and ranchers do what they do best, which is feed the world, put a lot of people to work and keep our economy going. And whether you know it or not, you are foundational to our national security. I know at Aimpoint, we believe that food security is foundational to national security and something that we simply can't take for granted. No matter how strong your economy is, how many tanks you have, how strong your military may be, the advanced technology you may have, all of it is dependent on the ability to have enough food, fuel, and fiber to feed our population and ideally to project that American food power around the world as one of the most stabilizing forces on the planet, in my opinion. So thank you for what you all do every day and supporting farmers and ranchers and national security. I don't envy the position that most retail leaders are in, because when you analyze the challenges that they confront, you really have to put them into two buckets: the close battle and the deep battle. They have plenty on their plate today with supply chain disruptions, inflation, interest rates, the need for new labor and the difficulty in getting that labor, new challenges to meet around ESG, digital transformation, and certainly we are in for additional geopolitical instability, certainly through 23 and probably into 24. It'd be very easy for all of you as leaders in retail and beyond to just consider dealing with that to be plenty. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of only dealing with the things that are directly in front of us. And when we start to consider the deep battle, what's going to emerge over the next 3, 5, 10 years, we have to keep an eye on that horizon as well. We are in an agricultural revolution, the fourth agricultural revolution, a digital transformation, a genetic transformation, a technological transformation, which is going to create an agriculture that looks very different than what we have today. The technology is going to bring incredible new tools to our farmers and ranchers and to your organizations. We have to embrace those tools, and we have to serve a future consumer that is quite simply demanding more from agriculture and food and from the value chain. They are going through their own revolution and identifying and understanding the role that food plays in their health and their ability to accomplish their goals. And they want us to provide healthier food, greater diversity of food, and to do it with less impact on the planet. And then there's the farmer of the future, which I'm going to talk about in more detail here in a bit, that is trying to evolve and transform and change fast enough to meet the needs of the future agri-food value chain. And they're looking to all of you and the retailers of the future to help them do that, to help them have the tools and the knowledge and the services they need to keep transforming. And so as we get into this discussion, I think it's important to acknowledge that we have a lot we're dealing with right now, and we're probably going to continue to have those challenges for the next couple of years. But we don't have the luxury of only focusing on those near-term challenges. We got to look long-term, and there's some very real things coming that require our attention and our energy as we work to transform retail to be ready for what's next.
No, thank you for sharing that, Brett. I'd like to share just a little bit more thoughts, also highlighting some Farm Journal research, and then I'm also going to toss it over to Ken for some introductory statements. I do want to share with our participants, we are taking questions. So the format of our webinar today is the three of us will kind of make our brief introductory remarks. We'll have a little bit of discussion, and then we will open it up for questions. So please feel free to submit those via the Q&A function on Zoom. So I know, Brett, you talk about the digitization of the business, you talked about technology, and just to jump a little bit more into that, for 5 years at Farm Journal, we've done a study trying to take measure of farmers' interest in buying online. And I think a key takeaway from this study, and really what makes it different in the market, is one, we've done it for 5 years, and two, we are specifically asking farmers about their crop inputs. So we're talking about crop protection, fertilizer, and seed. The other layer here that I'd really like to bring to the forefront is that in that 5 years, we've really made a transformation from the ag retailer perspective that 5 years ago, e-commerce, buying online, kind of that disruption to this trusted advisor relationship or perceived disruption was really perceived as a threat. But today, because of advancements in different platforms that have been developed and also retailers' perception of what's possible, it's really now an opportunity. So in 5 years, we've seen the percent of farmers buying any percent of their inputs online go from just 8 to 18%. Additionally, I would share the percent of farmers who say they intend to buy some of their crop inputs in 2023 online is 22%. So nearly in 6 years, we've tripled the percentage of farmers who are buying any of their crop inputs online. So a definite trend that is going to continue to change ag retail. But again, I don't necessarily see this, and I don't think ag retailers see this as much of a threat, but rather an opportunity. And I know, Ken, you're going to talk about changing business models too. So I do want to share a little bit on the back end of this. We ask farmers, so what does it mean to you when we say buy online? What does buy online mean? So almost 70% means that they're buying on a website or a grower portal or via an app of a retailer. 40% say that they're buying on an e-commerce site or an online marketplace. But almost 40% say it means that they research products online and then call to place an order with that retailer. So I think that's a really interesting aspect there. In talking to retailers, in fact, I just had an interview this week where they said in 3 months, they were able to get 80% of their key accounts on their grower portal. Other retailers say of their total farmer accounts, they're at that 20% mark. So I know we're going to talk about adoption in a little bit of a deeper discussion, but I wanted to share that takeaway. Also, so what are farmers buying online? You know, products open doors, but service builds trust, right? So those products that farmers are buying online, mainly herbicides, mainly their pre-emerge, their burn downs, followed by their post. And so it's really interesting to see that as a trend over these 5 years as well, that herbicides would be the #1 category. And then I also want to share, Brett, some work that you and I did together, talking about that deep battle, close battle. So in 2020, and then again in this last fall of 22, we did 2 studies really trying to assess at first the impact that COVID had on ag retail. But in this last study, in the current state of where we are, we really looked at what does the future mean for ag retail as far as farmers' needs, farmers' demands, and how they perceive their trusted retailer. So we had about 500 farmers respond. They say that their #1 challenge is the ability, is all financial. It's the financial strength and security. It's being able to purchase inputs at a fair price. And you also have to think about what fertilizer prices were doing this last fall in August and September, perhaps compared to today. But interesting that only 17% of the farmers said that their primary retailer has the best pricing. So there's something else there that we can tease out of why these relationships are being carried forward. Also, I would share that over half of farmers have said that their retailer of choice, their primary retailer, has changed in some way since they started doing business with them. So in so many ways, change is welcome, change is seen as normal, and change is seen as being able to help farmers get to where they need to go. So we ask farmers, okay, so what of this primary retailer who you spend the most money with, what products and services would you miss the most if they stopped offering? What products and services would you miss the least? And what products and services are important to start providing? And that center column is the one that always gets my attention first, which is they wouldn't miss seed and they wouldn't miss field days. So maybe we can all take this as a way to assess how are we spending our time, where are we investing, and in the spirit of the new year, what should be on our stop list. So with that, that's what I wanted to share to kind of kick us off. And I know, Ken, you kind of want to deliver maybe a little bit on the now what. So what does this mean for some changing business models? And also in light of the current ag.
Terrific. Thank you, Margie, and good to be with both you and Brett. I just feel the obligation for a moment, though, to talk a little bit, separate the buying online and the risks and the opportunities. So if we think about buying online and where the retail industry ought to go, in my opinion, I would say omni-channel, multi-channel is table stakes. It's mandatory. So buying online does not necessarily mean from buying from an alternative provider, i.e. a non-co-op or a non-independent retailer. It's more of a channel. And Brett, let's celebrate Ohio for a minute. Yes, it's me celebrating Ohio. Let's go back to 1992. I'm a Michigan fan, so for those going back to
this is rare.
Yeah, this is rare. Going back to 1992, 93, I visited Progressive Insurance, and Progressive was an auto insurance company, it still is, that had sold primarily through independent agents. So they were a manufacturer that sold their product, insurance, car insurance, through independent agents. And they cracked the code on the internet, which allowed them to offer an online experience and a really value-added, interesting experience. And then they also did something else. They went direct to the consumer. So what they decided, even though it was going to upset their agents, if you will, and here the parallel may be, retailers and salespeople, they said that the customer is looking for a different experience, and we want to give the customer optionality, whether or not they want to buy direct from Progressive through an independent agent or online. So I think there's something important there. And to take it even to another level of how they approached it, their online offering actually provided competitive quotes for 3, 4, 5 other competitors. So the customer actually got to see what the coverage would cost through other alternative brands. Buying, can you imagine an ag retailer opening up saying, this is what we charge, this is what you charge, but here we're giving you this information to be transparent and you make the call. I think customers appreciated that, and there was a greater take up with auto insurance customers that bought from Progressive online by providing that data, or those that wanted questions answered that had more sophisticated needs buying from an agent. So the point of the matter here is people want to buy online, they want to buy in person, they want to buy over the phone, they want to buy direct. I think that's critical as a backdrop, because if you don't add value to the customer, if you don't give the customer what they need, they will go elsewhere. So I think it's very important to establish that as table stakes. Now, when I think about the industry, and I just think about some of the dynamics I talked about at ARA, U.S. farm income is currently very strong, right? We had a very good year. In fact, USDA raised their estimate once, if not twice, last year. So farm income was very strong. Farm income was very strong in 2021 as well. And remember, this is an industry that typically has 3 very good years and then 4, 5, 6 not so good years. So first and foremost, this year, we believe year 3 is going to be year 3 of the upcycle. And if the upcycle lasts 3 years and we're already there, then critical for an ag retailers to think about planning for the near term, that a downturn is inevitable, and what your customer needs and your ability to service that customer is critical. If we then go a little bit further and we think about the current challenges, so ag retailers are facing business model risk. We think that will show up as we get a few more years into the downturn, call it, maybe mid-25 or 26. Now, disruptive forces and market volatility are stressing existing customer relationships. We think as farm income hits the trough in a few years, again, the normal cycle, farmer consolidation is likely to increase. And what Brett will talk about later is that next generation farmers have different needs and preferences. So if we just take it from a top level, using Michael Porter's 5-force analysis applied to retail, there's sort of 5 areas here I want to just highlight quickly and then turn it back to Margie to entertain questions or additional thoughts. So the competitive force number 1 is that competition and rivalry among existing players. That's the variable, and the risk level for ag retails, in our opinion, is high. The threat of new entrants, I would say low but increasing. New entrants, new business models, there have been a few out there on the market, call it FBN, call it Commodity Ag. I wouldn't say that the threat of new entrants is what worries me so much, but it is increasing. The bigger issue, and then there's a big issue. The big issue is power of suppliers. So input suppliers have consolidated, and virtually every other industry, including the automotive industry, allows customers to be able to buy direct from suppliers. We categorize that risk level as high. And again, how do you counter that? Well, it's the value added you deliver as a retailer. The next variable, number 4, is power of buyers. So the increased sophistication of the U.S. farmer and the consolidation, which is producing larger, more sophisticated and more impactful buyers, that's increasing. And then, of course, leaving the one for last is the threat of substitute products and approaches. This one I view as very high. And the reason is not so much the products per se, but the approaches to delivering the products. So at a board meeting this morning, I raised an issue, what I call one of the unspeakables. So farm equipment companies are collaborating more and more with farmers directly. And as we saw today, I think John Deere and Nutrien have a collaboration that's announced. Before that, even before we even consider those, think about how equipment has provided greater data analytics, sensors capability, and you see precision ag and prescriptive ag being expressed through the equipment you use on the field to inform and provide better decision making. Variable rate application of fertilizer and chemicals is proof to the pudding. So could there be a future state where equipment dealers and ag retailers come together to offer a greater value-added, differentiated approach? Maybe. Is there a current state where offering services for free and just making money on selling chemicals and seed, is that sustainable? I don't think that's sustainable. So looking at the Porter Five Forces, this informs what I think will be an industry transformation. And why don't I leave it there, Margie, and we can, if you'd like to come back to me on the future state of affairs, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ken. Thank you for sharing those introductory comments. So the first, and again, we are taking audience questions. Feel free to submit those via the Q&A function. We will be watching for those. But the first one that I do want to dive into, Brett, is you alluded to the farmer of the future. Now, this is psychographic analysis, and I would share too, even from our study on farmers buying online, the number one hypothesis people had when we launched that is, oh, it's only the young farmers, right, the under 35. And we showed with demographic analysis, no, age doesn't matter. So if you could share a little bit more about who the farmer of the future is and some of the work you've done there.
Yeah, certainly the demographics can be misleading. And several years ago, we started this research journey that maybe many are familiar with called Farmer of the Future. And we set out to answer the question, who are the farmers of the future and what will they need from all of us? What will they need from their retailer? And we went on a research journey that included qualitative research and a quantitative exercise, segmentation, that led to a psychographic segmentation that you see kind of at a high level here on this slide. What we were endeavoring to understand was how farmers make different decisions, how they view the future, how they think about challenges, how they embrace change, how do they embrace technology, and how do they ultimately navigate through the ups and downs of agriculture, which they all experience. What we found was that their psychographics was a better predictor of how they will ultimately emerge from what is a dynamic transformational time in agriculture. So their ability to embrace change, their willingness to surrender some level of independence and to challenge conventional wisdom was a big indicator. We found 5 psychographic segments in our research. The independent elites, 20% of the farmer rancher universe today, really successful farmers at the top of their game. They have a strong business IQ, really approach the business with a longer range view, certainly focus a lot on the business side of the practice. They are also very successful in growing their operation. They have financial strength and a long range view that allows them to take some risks. So the earlier adopters of new technologies, they're willing to change their model, and they have navigated through challenges quite well over the many years. The enterprising business builders, though, very unique group, the most entrepreneurial, the highest business IQ, growing the fastest, they are charging up the hill after the independent elites, and they're challenging conventional wisdom along the way, looking for new ways to grow. They're leaning forward on topics like regenerative ag and sustainable practices. Earliest adopters of new technology really have a global view of agriculture and are looking for partnerships that provide them a competitive advantage and ultimately an ROI that gives them an advantage in the market. They are the ones that are testing historical models the most and really shaking it up. They're the most tech savvy of them all. And so when we get back to talking about digital transformation, it matters. It's pretty important to these enterprising business builders. And I'll tell you why in a second. So the classic practitioners, the 24% there, are farmers that are still trying to grow their operation. They're still trying to accomplish their goals in agriculture, but lack some of the tools to get to the next level. A little lower business IQ. They find themselves under some level of ups and downs financially that put them on edge and make them a little more risk adverse. They tend to be a bit more traditional and slower to evolve than the other two categories. Self-reliant traditionals, not interested in change at all, really running the same play every year, resistant to technology, really fiscally conservative. That has helped them remain strong over the years, but they reject a lot of the change in both practice and technology that is coming. And then there's the leveraged lifestylers that are trying to be successful but lack the business sense. They get themselves over their skis a lot. They make investments that don't make sense. If you had a checklist, proud to be a great farmer, they've kind of checked all the boxes. They want to look and feel like a farmer, and they got the biggest truck and the coolest equipment and all the latest technology, whether they need it or not. And so they find themselves under some level of financial duress. In fact, substantial financial duress compared to the others. While we have market conditions this high, it's easier for folks to be successful. But when that starts to subside a little bit, you really figure out that some are able to navigate the challenges better than others. And what we know is that in every one of these categories, there are old farmers and young farmers and big farmers and small farmers, and that the demographics are really misleading. And that matters to a retailer, because as we progress through the next 10, 20 years in the changes that the fourth agricultural revolution will bring are unfolded, these categories start to play a bigger and bigger role. The independent elites and the enterprising business builders that represent collectively about 41% of the market today become 71% by 2040, and the other categories fade at different rates. So, the segmentation is instructive on how we can think about our business evolving, not to imply that we're going to stop serving any one group, but to imply that this is about resource and effort allocation, and that farmers want different things from their retailer. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. And as we get further in time, there are 5 different areas that we think are important to the transformation of the retailer in order to meet the needs of the farmers that will ultimately make it to the end here. And what we know is that by 2040, about 60,000 farmers are doing 75% of the agricultural output of the United States. Today, it's 105,000, so that's not unrealistic. That's what our modeling shows, but it also implies pretty substantial consolidation, upwards of 40-45% consolidation over the next 20 years, which means your customer base is going to get smaller. The size of the operations are going to get bigger and more sophisticated. And the retailer that is ultimately relevant in that future state has to commit to some pretty significant transformation between now and then. And we'll talk more about what I think those are as we progress here.
Margie,
So-
could I jump
Yeah, go
in
ahead,
just
Ken.
from Brett's point? So Brett, I think what you just said makes those 5 risks, the Porter's forces, even more, it calls to attention the greater risk of that. I think what's also interesting is you mentioned, I believe, on the leveraged lifestylers, what's interesting is in an up market, everyone's good. On Wall Street, the expression is don't confuse brains with a bull market, right? So what
Right.
is interesting here is that through the cycles, and especially with the world being riskier, I think the have-nots are going to get hurt more in the down cycle. And I think given our respect, obligation, and candidly, these are CoBank's clients, the retailers, we would like the system to recognize the risks, because if you always have three choices when the facts change. You can do nothing, do something, or do something transformational. And I have a bias towards change. I just wanted to call that out.
I think
Yeah.
that's right. And I mean, the psychographics are clear that the independent elites and enterprising business builders navigate those dynamics, ups and downs, better than the other three categories. And quite frankly, they feel very empowered. They believe in their own ability to navigate the ups and downs of markets, the challenges that will unfold. The others, not so sure about that ability, and a little thinner margins and more financially on edge. That makes it harder for them to persist in a protracted down market. So the consolidation is going to accelerate. We've seen it over the years. That's not a new dynamic. The question we have to ask ourselves is, who are the customers left standing and what will they require from us? And it's very different than what we're doing today.
So we've got some attendee questions that I just want to address real quick, because before we hop over to another topic. And so Brett, somebody asked about psychographical segmentation, and you answered it without me having to prompt you. So
Perfect.
Great job. And we do have a question trying to apply demographics to these psychographics. Specifically, are there any acreage breaks on the segments or any acreage trends that could be applied here?
So when you look at it nationally, the size of the farm and the age of the farmer is misleading. What I will tell you is that the independent elites and enterprising business builders are the beneficiaries of a lot of the growth that's happening now. And so over time, they certainly become larger. When you start to look at it a little more regionally, there are areas of the country that have already gone under some of the stressors that maybe other areas haven't, California being a great example. If you're farming in California, in the Central Valley, for example, you tend to have been probably already vetted into those left two categories. Otherwise, you're not standing already. And there are other parts of the country that would apply to as well on the coast. And there's areas within the center of the country as well. If you're in a commodity super center, like Illinois or Iowa, there's certainly consolidation happening there as well. But in a market like this, it allows folks to kind of persist a little bit more. So to answer the question directly, every one of these categories has big farmers and small farmers in it in terms of acreage. But as you model it out into the future, the left two categories are indeed the beneficiaries of the growth and will become larger and larger operations at scale. The fact that they're 71% of the farmer rancher universe by 2040, and that 60,000 are doing 75%, they're coming from those groups. So it's pretty easy math to know that they're going to be enormous operations over time. It's important to note one last point, Margie, is that farms don't have psychographics, farmers do. And that means that in a particular operation, we see small and mid-sized operations out there that are growing like rockets. We see huge operations that are coming down, and it largely is about who's running them. And if a son or a daughter is elect to have more control, perhaps you can change the psychographics of the operator. If you have others that you hire onto your team or your staff, you can maybe change the direction of that farm. We find that the farmers themselves individually typically have an almost impossible time changing their psychographic profile, but they can surround themselves with people that help them make different decisions that lead them to success. So that's something to keep in mind. And that comes back to the retailer, right? When we get to the models of the future, how you help your customers transform into what is a very predictable, if you look at the data and you look at the macro trends, a very predictable future state of agriculture, you are on the front lines of helping empower that change and making sure that your customers are the ones standing. But you have a responsibility there and an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think that is the role of ag retail, right? Is they are helping farmers navigate complexity when farming by itself is already so complex. So Ken, you addressed risk already. What would you say ag retailers need to stop doing? What should be at the top of that stop list?
So it's interesting because in the game of golf and in the world of investing, the fewer mistakes, the better the score. Margie, I wanted to go off script for a minute because before I answer that question, I wanted your permission to share one screen that I forgot to show you and Brett in our pre-work. And
Sure.
and I promise it won't be a Metallica video or anything too crazy. But if you permission me to share a screen, what I wanted to do, and let me just see if the functionality is there. Yeah, I think I need Shelley to help there. But in a nutshell, what I looked at, Brett, when and you know what, Margie, we could do it a different way. Why don't we go back to Brett's Farmer of the Future? Because I think that is very instructive, that graphic. If we look, so if you put that up there, Brett,
Sure.
what I like is how you, especially the percentages, right, and thinking about where those could move to. When I look at that chart, and I have just had the benefit of meeting a number of folks at the Aimpoint team and really getting a better understanding of how you guys look at this, I look at the independent elites and the enterprise business builders and the leverage lifestylers, for better or for worse, looking for something different. And that the classic practitioners and the self-reliant traditionalists seem to be served very well by ag retail. So without getting too complicated, 3 of those 5 categories are looking for something different. And again, without, from my sort of simple way to look at it, that should be a call to the action for the retailers to think about entertaining conversations and thinking a little differently. Margie, now with that backdrop done, I guess what I would say is what retailers should do and what they shouldn't do. So on a very, very general level, upstream agriculture has successfully navigated a lot of change over the past 100 years, but I think the next 5 to 10 are going to be extremely volatile. So in that context, the first step in the journey for change is to really ask the question, does your business model look forward to embrace change, or does it look backward to defend the past? If it defends the past, typically, you're not going to be willing to make changes that cannibalize your existing business for the benefit of future business, and that can be fatal. In terms of tangible advice and thoughts and conversations that CoBank and my team is having with our customers, I would call out 3 tangible activities that should be front and center in strategic planning in 2023. First, adding diversity to the board and your management team ranks to avoid doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different outcomes. That's a no-brainer, right? If everyone in the room looks the same, you are the collective of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you may not get different points of view, and you may not get that healthy discourse to evaluate new opportunities. Next, you really need to improve internal risk management capabilities. Look at some of the more advanced ag tech software technologies that help you understand your customer's needs, and deliver value there. And then third, I truly believe that the key to success in an environment which is volatile, unpredictable and really difficult for any human mind to estimate, don't try to do it yourself. Conduct scenario modeling. And I don't mind telling you, I think the wargaming and deep scenario analysis that Brett and his team have pioneered to outline the future, possible states of farming and how your business will respond to those, I also think that's a no-brainer. How can you navigate forward if you don't understand the possible paths and the possible risks and reward? And then you put a probability on that, right? You think about maybe there's a 20% chance of this happening, a 50% chance of that, a 10% of this. And then you do a weighted average of which path forward is most likely. And then what will your strategy mean to address that? So part of this goes into a very simple concept of open your mind up to have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is I'm going to keep doing everything I'm doing. And as you all have seen, the definition, Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Don't do that. Think a little differently. And we're not talking monumental. We're talking about opening up the discussion about what if. So I would say that's sort of the salient, tangible recommendations. And then I'm also, be delighted to talk about what we see as the future situation, and then 5 business models in the future that we think are likely for ag retail.
Excellent. Do you want me to pull up those 5 business model slides, Ken?
Why don't we pull up the timeline first? Just then I'll cover that very quickly. It's the chart that has the 3. So the future situation. So what's interesting, why is it 3? People only understand 3 things at a time is my viewpoint. And you know what? Traffic lights work really well, and there's 3 colors. So whenever you hear me present, or if I, in my research reports, I usually have 3 takeaways, occasionally 5, but usually 3. So when we think about the situation, phase 1 is disruption, and I think that's going on now. I think we had a lot of factors that were in the background before Russia's invasion to Ukraine. The disruptive factors in 2023 and 24, I think, come from, candidly, Brett, the farmer of the future, having taking a greater stake in what he or she wants to do and what they need. Then I would say phase 2, Margie, is the reconstruction phase. That's where people start seeing in any business, mature businesses sometimes go into decline. And when customers' needs change and they act on those, that means that the customers are going to try different things. They may try, the larger farmers may try to directly buy equipment from the OEMs. They may try to buy fertilizer and seed and chemicals directly from the suppliers if they're bigger and they want to use their buying power to lower the price. They probably will. Ironically, that's why co-ops formed in the beginning, to bring more sophistication together, greater acres to negotiate. However, when farmers are getting bigger, more sophisticated, and those that have digital capabilities, I think that's where the industry reconstruction happens, and that's where there's a greater sort of polarization of those that get it and those that may not. Phase 3 is the renewal. So I think about disruption, reconstruction, renewal. Renewal is what we believe happens about 10 years out, where there's probably 5 different business models that are dominant. And if you think about it, virtually every other part of ag has consolidated down to 4 or 5 major players. I'm not suggesting 4 or 5 retailers. I'm suggesting 5 business models, each with unique capital requirements, and each with unique return requirements. So if I were to just give you the thinking, and I welcome both you and Brett to weigh in here and push back or offer your thoughts. Large full service retailers. Look, I think there's a business case to being an integrated department store of crop inputs, right? Operational excellence is important. Each salesperson at the different divisions of a department store, they better know suits and shoes and makeup, right? Otherwise, you're not going to sell. I think the large service retailers will have the advantage of, with the right people, the ability to offer sort of a one-stop shop. Some people call that, in the financial world, they call that the financial supermarket. That actually didn't work, but nonetheless, there are models that do work. It just didn't happen in finance. Regional innovators and specialists. Here I think about the fact that every part of the country, each farming region is so unique. And today I had the privilege to present to a Colorado cooperative. But next week it'll be 2 weeks in Nebraska cooperative. Very different market dynamics, very different acreage under management, very different product suites, very different issues of, do you sell your product? Is it an export market or is it an import market? So I think the regional innovators and specialists are, that's a strong one. I would then go down to the product-only sellers and logistic providers. Here, I think we see some examples of that. ADM, which is mainly thought of as a grain company, has ADM Fertilizer, which provides incredible product, sale, delivery. So being excellent at logistics without complicating some of the other offerings, I think there's a market for that. I'll go up then to independent advice providers. Here, I call this asset light. And candidly, I may die in the seat before this ever happens, but until I retire, I think about all the great advice that ag retailers provide for free while trying to, collect on the issue of getting paid with product sales. I think that has to be unbundled. I believe that you can look to other industries that used to sell commission products and advice and then separated that. So I think the independent advice providers may be analogous to the independent financial planners of the financial world. They structure comprehensive estate management and investment management plans, and they get paid a fee for the advice and the assets under management rather than commission on product sales. I think there's a parallel there. And then, of course, is the wild card category. I felt like I needed 5, and I couldn't come up with anything too exceptional here. But next generation service providers encapsulates those interesting business models, which candidly, there's quite a few in circulation now, and they're blazing a path. Whether or not FBN gains tremendous market share or not, FBN is challenging the status quo, and you need to respect, celebrate, and you need to just understand that their vision, unless I'm reading their materials wrong, seems to be 100% focused on the customer. So rather than poo-pooing that and ignoring that, I think you have to respect the fact that there are those that are taking concepts from other industries and just saying, let's try it here. So I think this is also fun and it's scary, but it's also interesting because right now, all the information that the ag retailers needs, I think is out there due to the work Aimpoint has done and through the perspective that I'm trying to provide. So the answers are here. Now it's a question of acting.
So Brett, we did get an attendee question that I think is relevant here, but I want to get your take on, and it is talking about those perceptions of product and service bundled versus standalone product or service purchases. And they want it specifically in respect to the elites, the builders, and those traditionalists.
Well, when I think about the retailer of the future, and I'll get into my attributes here in a minute, but one of those attributes is that we do need to be value add to the inputs, that those are commodities. They're going to lose more and more margin value to the retailer. And so it's how we surround it with service and knowledge that matters. The enterprising business builders in particular are lifelong learners. They are predisposed to believe that they can always get better. They can always learn something new. They can always try something new. And they want to be surrounded by people that challenge their thinking and make them better. And when Ken talks about open mindsets, they have that open mindset. They want partnerships with organizations, whether that's their local retailer or someone anywhere else in the nation, that helps them think about how to get better at what they do and how to use products better and how to become more efficient. So they're learners. Independent elites, they're going to make the decision on their own. They're a little less collaborative, but they tend to surround themselves with pretty wise folks that help them make decisions. But they are looking to grow and compete and expand. They tend to be earlier adopters of technology and change. And so they're going to digest the advice that you give them, and then they're going to make a decision. But don't mistake, they still want that advice. They still want to hear from you. And what I think we have to acknowledge, the self-reliant traditionals are the most focused locally. They're the ones that are going to use that local retailer, that local vendor, that local bank, and they're not going to grow. They're also low-cost shoppers. They want to save money. And so they're going to push you and they're going to challenge you. And they're not going to see the value of all those services and things that you bundle with, but the farmers of the future will. And that's who's going to be left standing. And so you're going to have to bifurcate your model a little bit and think about, how do we provide for the commodity business that people want to buy if they're on the low end of that spectrum? And then how do we amp up the value add to the farmers of the future, who will only work with you if you provide it, period. As Ken said, as they get to scale and rethink models and rethink how they purchase commodities, how they bind together themselves to create significant acreage, we have to acknowledge that our control over the inputs is going to slip over time. And so it's only what you add to the value of that equation that is going to be instrumental, I guess, in your long-term success.
Well, even the studies that we've done together, while pricing is a huge concern, what the farmer is really focused on with the retailer is how they are clearly delivering value. And I think that's the challenge to the retailer, is to simplify and demonstrate how they're really doing that. So Ken, you've got our crowd all worked up about your 5 buckets here. Okay. So the first one would be the catch-all category. I think they're looking for a few more examples of what these next gen service providers might do, what they might look like.
Right. So if you will go with me out on the ledge to think about getting paid for advice, to me, it's not that much of a stretch. If I had a heart problem and I went to the surgeon, and the surgeon said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to charge you for the consultation or the surgery. I'll just get paid on the machine that goes in my heart," I'd probably say no. Okay. So when you think about advice and product, I think there's a business case to separate that, right? So if you then, again, go out on the ledge, and I realize that this is a little, maybe an alternative way to look at it. Let's think about the checklist of what farmers have to worry about today. And as most of you know, I like to use a little humor in it, but it's all about celebrating the great work that the U.S. farmer does and the misperception out there in the marketplace, right? So we have fertilizer, nutrient runoff, pollution, climate change, people telling the farmer that what they're doing is wrong. First of all, it's not nice to tell somebody else that their business is anything unless you've done the business. That's a separate point, right? Precision agriculture. Why can't you produce more with less? Have you been looking at what corn yields were 100 years ago versus today? Have you looked at what the amount of milk that's produced with fewer dairy cows today? There's a lot of things that the US farmer does and does well that people don't understand. When you think about how you're going to trace where the grain was produced, what was used to produce that grain, all the way to a box of cereal, isn't that an opportunity? And I'm not saying we will ever get there, or we may not get there in the near term, but there's all these challenges where you have the folks that are doing the hard work of farming, whatever their product is, and then you have a consumer marketplace that some people say is crazy and other people just believe that most people are crazy. So whatever the answer is there's a business case for the retailer while you have this trusted relationship to rethink what you deliver and what you sell. And that is even before getting fancy with all the really exciting ag technology that's out there. So again, you know that I use examples from other industries to make the point. So Best Buy created the Geek Squad many years ago because when personal computers were sold for home use versus just at the office, people like myself needed to understand what exactly is a tape backup drive, right? What is this thing called the internet back in 1992, right? How do you understand how equipment interacts with each other? So one of the papers I wrote a few years ago was I felt like, agriculture needs a geek squad so that the adoption of agricultural tools and technologies with the hundreds of companies that we read about and learn about and get excited about, there has to be a Sherpa, there has to be a agent that helps bring that to fruition. And I think the retailer has a tremendous opportunity to be that party. One other example. So when Cisco changed the game on connectivity equipment that would connect systems and the internet and business practices, this was in the 90s, the IT department was filled with people that were sort of help desk people, right? You would go and assist your internal customer, but the paradigm was changing. The router, really connected people to the World Wide Web, as it was called. So how did they do that? How did Cisco do that? Well, they put together the Cisco Academy, and then they trained people so that these industry experts could then flare out into American business and then global business and help people make the transition. I think there's some parallel there, Brett. I'd be interested what you think, but it takes a village, right? And the first thing that I think we try to do and need to do is celebrate those institutional traditions and behaviors that got us where we are. And we have to be extremely proud of the US being able to be the leading food grain producer in the world and produce protein. Bar none, the American farmer has done what he and she have been asked to do. But now this next step requires, I think, a more thoughtful, tactical approach.
So we have a couple of attendee questions that touch on so much of what you just shared, Ken. And Brett, I'm going to pose this one to you first, but Ken, please weigh in. Somebody's asking specifically about advancing sustainable ag practices and ag retail's role. So that could be in light of consumer-driven change. It could be in light of ESG, what have you. But what is the ag retailer's goal or role in that?
They absolutely have to be involved in that because the farmers of the future are leaning forward on it, and the agri-food value chain of the future will require it. So when we think about all the things that Ken kind of laid out and what is a next generation retailer, there are 5 key components, and I think it all ties back to, how are we helping the farmer evolve and meet those future needs? And one of those is sustainability and ESG, right? A retailer of the future evolves from goods to services, right? To think about how we add value to those inputs that we have traditionally provided, and how do we augment that in a way that that adds competitive advantage to our customers. We have to provide alternative inputs because many of the preferred relationships that the farmers of the future will have with the supply chains will require them to grow differently, to use different products, biologicals, different types of fertilizers, different types of processes. And the retailer is in the best position to help with that transition. Retailer is going to have to engage digitally, which means not just selling online, but really providing advice and engagement and clarity and helping to provide alternative perspectives and knowledge, but also the opportunity for unique products and for farmers to learn about that. And you're going to have to support data and traceability, which is table stakes of the future and required by the agri-food value chain and part of sustainability. The FEC or the SEC is really clear about that, is that we are moving from claims to proof. Our war game back in 2021 showed that we were going to have to transition this industry and the food industry from claims to proof, meaning we can't just say we reduced carbon or we did reduce greenhouse gases or we did something in a certain sustainable practice. We're going to have to prove it, and data is going to be part of that, and traceability is going to be required if you want to have any product that goes to market. The challenge we have is you have some farmers that are saying, I don't want to share my data, it's private, it gives away too much information. They're just flat cold wrong. Their data is going to be part of the product of the future, period, or their product has no value. You're going to have to be a link in that chain back into the agri-food value chain. I think retailers are particularly well suited, and you're going to have to be a gateway to new technology too that helps them be more optimized, more proficient, more efficient, but also more sustainable. So this sustainability topic, everyone stretches to define all the things that it touches. But if you become the retailer of the future, if you do these 5 things that I'm talking about, you will naturally be leaning forward on sustainability and reduced inputs and reduced and more precision agriculture, higher technology approaches to helping our farmers ultimately succeed. The farmers of the future are already doing it, and they're not waiting to be told. They're not waiting for a federal regulation. They're not waiting for a farm bill. They are doing it now because it will give them a competitive advantage with the supply chain, and that is what they are chasing. And you either help them in that or you don't.
So Ken, going a little bit back to business models, if you can, we have a question. It appears to be from an emerging technology or a startup, and they're expressing some frustration at being able to break through in the established ag retail chain. What are your thoughts about going direct to farmer?
So first of all, going direct to farmer is not easy, right? And you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, do you even have the right to engage? Because you need to be knowledgeable about how the business works. And this is a very complex business. You can spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and do a lot of analytics. And then weather can be the factor that really changes your outcome for the year. So what I would suggest is that if there's something that the emerging ag tech companies could do a little differently, first, it's bring a gift, bring the value first before you put a price on it. Because the industry, the emerging tech, is very good about coming up with a price for a model to raise capital to then try to execute on. And you're doing that without the basics of, is there a need and can you fill it? So that would be one point. Brett, I thought what you just laid out a minute ago, I don't have anything to add. I think from the standpoint of a disciplined approach and what ag retailers should think about and execute on, it's this: you need a framework. And ironically, the only piece that might not be apparent to people, it's very hard when you hear people complain all the time. Labor's been a problem for a long time. Labor has become even more of a problem with some very strong opinions on immigration. I don't want to go there, but I just want to lay that out. So you think about rural America and empowering rural America, and then you think about this great opportunity that the ag retailers have to bring technology to the farm. One would think that if you spent some money on hiring some civilian data scientists, as I call them, at the co-op to crack the code on working with farmers to add value to other parts of the agri-food chain that Brett talked about. It's you can't just get all the farmers to wear a t-shirt called, hug a foodie, right? That's not going to do it. Can you bring the thoughtful approach through data, insights, and advice to add value to the farmers so they can see what this movement and some of the trends are?
You have to differentiate. And that's one way to do it.
So
right.
Go ahead, Ken.
No, I was also going to say, Brett, I thought you also mentioned something interesting, which I think about. I don't want to upset anybody, but chemicals and fertilizers are commodities, right? They just are. How you apply those, how you create the right combination, that's adding value. But do you have the intellectual capacity and the process to do it? And by the way, this biologicals is a very interesting product area, which has a lot of positive attributes to sustainable ag. If you have lemons, make lemonade, right? Why are we resisting when there's new and diverse income streams here? Said differently, if you did a Venn diagram and you put farmers, input companies, retailers, consumers, and society all interacting, there would be an area of gray that you would see intersects. And that ought to grow over time, creating value for the system. Sorry, Margie, I know you had another thought.
No, that's okay. No, and we've got more questions than we're going to be able to answer. But maybe our last question, because it's a topic we haven't touched on a lot, would be around land prices and interest rates. And if you gentlemen could each just share your outlook and interpretation for how impactful those are today and will be in the near future.
I'll let the economist answer that.
Should I do the?
I have my point of view, but yours is probably.
Should I do the on the one hand and on the other hand? Okay.
There you go.
What economists do, yes.
And then Brett and I can each slap a hand. How's that?
So you know what? As you know, I'm not really an economist. I'm just an analyst, and I'm me. And I call it like I see it as best I can, but I'm often wrong. But I don't on this hand and the other. Let's just get to it. Interest rates have gone up. Interest rates have gone up materially. It's not the end of the world, though. My mortgage was 7% in 1997 when I bought the house. Mortgages are under 7% now, even with the move up. This is manageable. The issue is for people that were leveraged and are leveraged at 0.5 federal funds rate plus a risk premium before, this is going to be different. So there will be impacts because of being able to fund operations. And if you're not efficient and you're not the low-cost operator, I think that'll hurt. Land values are fascinating. This came up in a discussion today. Land values are, there always seems to be a bid for good farmland, right? Institutional investment in US farmland is pretty low. So the issue is when interest rates were not so high, farmland provided a return that was above the very low interest rate level. Now, if the 10-year gets to the 4.5 or 5 or 5.5% level, all of a sudden, risk-free assets that don't involve the anxiety of farming or farmland become more attractive. That ought to be a dynamic that impacts farmland values. And by the way, one thing that is now on my list of things that keep me up at night, with the water shortages in different places, that will manifest itself in land values negatively, if not solved. You had one more item for me to answer and address the outlook. Debt to GDP, US debt to GDP is 120%. It was at 105 a few years ago. We are at the level above where we were at or above where we were at World War II. So with all due respect to our good friend Peter Zeihan, 9 to 15% interest rates ain't gonna happen. It will not happen. I believe, and this is a Ken comment, not a CoBank comment, that we probably settle somewhere between 5 and 6%. That's actually pretty normal. So I don't think we're going to 9. And by the way, inflation has been coming down. We had a print this week and last week that were good. So I don't see 9 to 15%. The US will bankrupt itself. We can't pay the debt. I feel 5 to 6% is probably the range. And if I had to bet, if I had to guess, I would say 5.5, which is right in the middle.
Brett, anything to add on land and interest rates? Otherwise, I have one more provocative wrap-up question.
You know, I saw the CEO of Procter & Gamble on CNBC today, and he said, you look, the economy is going to go up and down, interest rates are going to go up and down, lots of things are going to happen. That's weather. Because what we can control are how we approach change, how we approach the business, how we add value, how we serve our clients. And I would focus more on evolving my model and the leadership that will be required to become a retailer of the future in serving those clients and customers who are going to have to change faster and faster. And there's going to be lots of challenges along the way. I think Ken's right. I think, you know, the economy, the interest rates, land prices are astronomical. I don't think they're coming down. I think at the end of the day, between the importance of natural resources and the interest by many to own a tangible asset, there's going to continue to be competition over farmland that's going to drive it up. I'm not sure any of that is in our control as retail leaders, though. So what we can control is our business model and the intelligence that we bring into the boardroom, the way we approach the strategy of the long term vis-a-vis these short-term disruptions. And I think, you know, that's what we need to take away is we have to deal with the close battle issues. We have to think about the deep battle too. And that's going to take leadership. And I just appreciate everybody focusing on that here for an hour or so, but also more importantly, their continued leadership of our industry. I can't say it enough as a former Army officer, we should never take for granted what we have here in the United States and the incredible power it gives us in the world, and the ability to feed ourselves and feed others is something we have to protect.
No, well said, Brett. So we have a lot of questions, folks. I'm going to try to get all of these questions answered and maybe emailed out to you. So hang tight there. This session has been recorded. You will receive an email with that link within the next day. And then it will also be available at farmjournal.com. Brett and Ken, I have one final question for us, and I'll answer it first, but I'm going to be a selfish moderator and take the last question. And that is, what is one prediction for the year ahead? Now, as editor of The Scoop, I talk to ag retailers all the time. I'm going to kind of do a twofer there, but they're related. And I think 23 will be the year that we have to stop talking about ag data as a standalone thing. Sure, we've referenced today in our session, it is table stakes for so much, but there is so much more that's important about technology rather than just the data. And I think we're going to have to elevate our conversation about the tools that can be provided with the data and the engine that it is. But ag data as a standalone thing, I don't foresee that. Related, when it comes to autonomy and machinery autonomy, I think the folks that are the beta testers and are willing to show these starting emerging technologies, whether they're pre-commercial, are the ones who are displaying the use cases that these are being programmed against. So the beta testers of autonomy, I believe, are writing the future of autonomy this year. Now, we may not see those systems for another 3 years, but if you aren't engaged in that space, your use case is not going to be considered right away. Ken or Brett, you guys arm wrestle, who gets to go next?
Brett goes to go next because I answered the interest rate question.
I mean, I guess that where I settle out is that disruption will continue to be the rule and not the exception. The world is realigning. There are geopolitical forces that are at play, obviously with Russia and the Ukraine, but also with China. There are forces that will change the way we do business. And American leadership, and especially our ag leadership, will continue to be more and more important. And the only key advice I can give about all of that is that in every war game that we conduct, and we conducted 28 industry war games, agri-food war games in 2022, and a common thematic in all of them is the power of collaboration and the need to work together. And so form those partnerships, call each other up, figure out how you can work together, how you can align resources, how you can support each other, because that collaboration will yield strength, and that strength will mean that America can continue to lead in the world.
Well said, Brett. Ken, final thoughts.
So this morning, gentlemen have presented a thought to me, thought process that the highway to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So good intentions, which are not aligned together, can be headbutting. They can actually disrupt each other. So Brett, to your point on collaboration, I hope, I don't know, but I hope that this is the year where we get it, because there's two kinds of lessons in life, the expensive ones and the inexpensive. The expensive ones teach people the most, but they hurt the most also. In terms of predictions, Margie, I think that we will actually have a soft landing, in contrary to many, many predictions of recession. In fact, a pet peeve of mine is when people change the rules, and the rules were you had two quarters in a row last year of negative GDP. That's a recession. We had a recession. Whether we have another one is the real question. And it appears that notwithstanding going from near zero to what will probably be about 5%, 5 and change this year, the US economy is doing okay. We had soft retail sales, but we've also had very strong GDP growth. So I think my prediction is that, yes, there will be a slowdown in the US economy, but I do not think it's as bad as the World Bank is suggesting at 0.5%. So that's my prediction.
Well, Brett and Ken, you have been so generous with your time and insights. To all of our audience today, thank you for joining us. By the numbers, it appears you guys got great value out of this. So it's so wonderful to be together in this format and share some of our thoughts heading into the new year and what the future of ag retail looks like. For all of you, please stay connected with us. We are at thedailyscoop.com. We're at agweb.com, across all socials, where we also regularly connect with Ken and Brett. So we're pretty easy to find. And until we're together next time, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.